Hello and welcome to the Michael Clark Show podcast, where every Wednesday I'll bring you an interview with a different special guest. Many will be from the world of sport. All of them have a story worth sharing. In a time when doom and gloom is all too easy to find, this is a place where we'll be promoting the positive. So I hope you'll keep me company each week as I explore where our guests get their motivation and inspiration from to succeed. This week, our special guest on the podcast is a top commentator who has worked with some of the biggest names in mixed martial arts. How did he climb the ranks to reach the UFC? And what is it like to be behind the mic on fight night? Let's find out. It's episode 5 of the podcast, and once again, a brilliant guest. I'm thrilled to have this man on, and I was actually inspired by a post that he put up on social media. We'll get into that. He's a UFC commentator. It's John Gooden. Thank you for coming onto the podcast, John.
Oh, cheers. Thanks for having me on.
It was that post you put up on social media at the start of the year, because let's face it, in January, a lot of people are thinking about their goals, where they want to be, maybe not quite there yet. And you put up a quite good metaphor, really. There's no picture 2 without picture 1, and it was explaining, with every good journey, a lot of hard work that goes unseen, and it's your journey I want to get into today. But I just want to say thanks for that post, because I thought a lot of people are feeling that way in a new year.
Yeah, and it wasn't kind of probably born out of the place that you maybe had interpreted it, because I was on a place called Fight Island, Yas Island in Abu Dhabi. It was like this big promotional push to call it Fight Island, and we're in a wonderful hotel. And I'm doing what I love, but I got so many messages going, oh, you're the luckiest man in the world, or you're just over there getting a suntan and got the best seats in the house for the fights, blah, blah, blah. And my job has probably never been more challenging. So as much as I wasn't sunbathing, many commentators will know what this is like, but your work is done in front of screens many hours, days, weeks beforehand, and your work's also never finished. You can have a passing moment in a hallway with an athlete, and all of a sudden everything that you had envisioned for that piece of storytelling is just gone. Like, in a good way, you'll find something new, a new direction. So I always keep an open mind. So I'm always studying and reading and watching interviews. So it just really irked me that people just kept thinking that I'm out here on a jolly, and my colleagues as well. And it really isn't that way. So it was a kind of, I didn't want to sound like I was moaning, but I wanted to make it clear, because I've also had quite a few people reach out to me about how I got into what I got into, and they want to do the same thing. And I'm not sure people really understand what it takes and the sacrifices that one might have to make. So, and I've had to make a fair few. Some people are lucky, but for those that don't are outliers. Let's be honest. It is a hard grind, but we love what we do, so it's all worthwhile.
Exactly. It isn't all glamorous, and that's the thing that people don't see. They just see the Instagram post or whatever they're watching on the television.
Yeah, and that's a very it's a lens, isn't it? It's a specific lens, Instagram. And I've grappled hard with social media over the years. Like, my wife's works in that space. She's in marketing, and we now have a daughter, and we've seen the sort of perils of social media. And I mean, I don't know what it's like for you, but in terms of getting representation and going out and speaking to people in that area, I wouldn't say it doesn't matter the quality of your work, but no one's really that interested in my work. They're interested in my social media numbers. And I couldn't really care too much about that. But then on the other hand, I'll get bitten in the backside, or we'll go through a pandemic and the opportunities aren't presenting themselves. And I start thinking, maybe I should have concentrated harder on these social media numbers. And that meant probably showing life through a specific lens, all the bits that you want people to see, and not really the boring bits, because they don't resonate so hard. So it's a tricky one, but I actually do try and give a little bit of balance, because I think it's important, and I don't agree with this notion that everything should always be like this wonderful shop front. You know, you should also see the back office at times as well, because that's reality.
Yeah, and that's always a scary thing, I guess, for anyone to do, particularly when you're in the public eye, because you might not want to open that, pull back that curtain too far.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a pretty open book, if I'm honest. I don't think I'm not a huge celebrity or personality, or have to worry about any of those things. I was actually with Conor McGregor on Fight Island and saw him and his family, and like two separate crews, and an untold amount of security that he wandered around with all the time. And you just think, wow, that I'm not sure if I'd want that for myself. I just don't know. And I'm not saying I ever aspired to get there. And I'm in the wrong game, a man behind the microphone rather than in front of the lens, to ever really want to climb that kind of fame. It was never about that. But it does sometimes, again, you as a commentator, as a storyteller, you sort of put yourself in his position and from a different angle, and you try and imagine what that might be like and the pressures that might bring to an athletic performance, etc., etc. But yeah, I don't have to worry about the things that he does, that's for sure.
I guess that's one of the nicest things about being a commentator, is you can get close to those people, but you can also step back. Whereas Conor McGregor, who obviously you know very well, and it isn't just through the UFC. I mean, you were there right before he exploded, calling some of his fights, so you know his journey better than most people, I would have thought. But you've seen how much that's changed for him, and I guess the pros and cons.
Yeah, and his rise has been unprecedented. As a sportsman, like a sports person, I really can't remember many other people through history, really, that have climbed as fast as he has, accumulated as much wealth as he has, influence, etc. Because I remember specifically looking at a Forbes rich list, and he had apparently the same net worth as Gareth Bale. And this was, 3 years ago, maybe? So I'm not sure I think it may have even been before the Mayweather fight. Don't quote me on that. But I just thought that was astonishing. A top flight footballer that is an international star at the time, I think he was still at Madrid. Thought, how is this kid, who is only really, like, he broke into the UFC in 2013, and you don't earn money really before then. So in, like, let's say 5 years, whatever it was, to accumulate that kind of wealth and notoriety in that time period is astonishing, absolutely astonishing. And how do you deal with that? I think it's a fantastic sort of psychological study, to go from someone who was relatively unknown, maybe in Ireland, a popular figure, and I would know that from being at his shows early on, but then to be an international superstar within such a short amount of time, you just don't have the foundation to be able to keep that structure solid, or most people don't. He has done a fairly good job, I believe, in many respects, of keeping certain things aligned so that he can continue to grow, where a lot of people will fall over and, probably just become recluses. It would just be way too much for most.
We'll maybe come back onto that topic a little later on, but in terms of your journey, I guess, when did you realize you wanted to be a commentator? Because I am aware that you're trained in various other things too.
Yeah, the commentator thing came later. Presenter was something that I had entertained the idea of fairly early on. I do remember doing like radio broadcasts with a very old friend called Ben when I was round at my grandma's place. I used to go there every other weekend, I believe, and we'd do our own little radio show. So that would have been super early on. But I was working in this, I did the usual kind of graduate into the City of London type deal. Didn't quite get to the area that I wanted to. I actually wanted to be a stockbroker, funnily enough, only because of, I think, the money and all of the bells and whistles that came with that, the fancy suit, whatnot, probably from a TV program I'd seen that. But I ended up working in financial markets, but on the recruitment side. And It served me very well. I had a good time, and I learned many skills. Interviewing became one of the things. Like I would interview maybe 3 people a day at times. So that was something that I've carried all the way through my career. It's been interesting how I actually built on that. But I also found myself getting a lot more confidence. And where my love for what I was doing was dwindling away because things started to get a bit more serious, I then started looking around at other things and thought I could deliver information in a more entertaining way, perhaps, than some of the people we were seeing on the TV. Like, I reckon I could do that job too type deal. So I actually jacked in the city gig and went to work for free at the BBC as just like a runner, work experience. And I was with the BBC for a couple of years. I actually got a job there, didn't manage to do it all for free, or wouldn't have done it all for free. But then the opportunities never really came. And if I'm honest, I wasn't good enough. I didn't really know where I wanted to be, what it was. I was interviewing in like the economics unit one week and then children's TV the next. It was all over the place. And it felt like I was just trying to get in front of the camera at that point, which deep down wasn't my why, if you like. So after having a failed bid at trying to realize a dream, I just really just kind of shelved it, didn't think too much of it, moved on. I actually ended up going back to the city and moved on from there again and joined up with my dad in his electrical contracting business. But all the while, sports have just been such a massive part of my life, from when I started like judo at 7, karate, I've done boxing, a lot of football, squash, swimming, triathlon. So there's been lots and lots and lots of participation. And I fell back into combat sports in my late 20s. And really the sport was, or still is, underrepresented at the time, in my view. No disrespect to people who may recognize the others that were playing in it, but poorly represented, I feel, in this part of the world. So I just thought that this was an opportunity for me to maybe apply some skills that I'd learned. But more than that, really was, I saw the disrespect that people in mixed martial arts were getting. Like my coach, who is elite level, I'm still with the same guy, and some of the others that we trained with, no one would know who they were if they walked past them in the street. No other sportsman would probably give them the kudos that they deserved. They certainly weren't earning any money. They were barely able to keep the academy open. And that just didn't sit well with me. And a lot of this is about misconceptions. So with that and an opportunity that presented itself on my coach's own show, actually in Watford, I put my hand in the air to do a bit of backstage reporting. But he said, actually, what about doing some commentary? Because we can put a couple of cameras up on the cage and it would just make it a bit more interesting. We can maybe sell a few DVDs and that'll help him recoup some costs. And funny, when he mentioned that to me, I remember when I was at the BBC, they have a circular, and that sometimes includes like the jobs that are available. And they were looking for, I guess, apprentice commentators a long, long time ago when I was in my early 20s. And I looked at it and I did pause on the classified, if you like. And I just thought, commentary. And I thought, no, I really think that I want to be in front of the camera rather than behind the mic. And I therefore just sort of brushed it away. And look at me now. It's kind of crazy that I didn't see anything at the time, but perhaps the sport and the way that it was just a bit different. And I guess as a young man, the football commentators and the boxing commentators that I would have heard and enjoyed the work of, I never really knew what they looked like. They always seemed to be more senior, like a little bit older, very well spoken, highly educated broadcast journalists. And that wasn't me. So yeah, I never really thought that it was something that I connected with. But lo and behold, it came back around. And I've basically just done amateur grassroots stuff all the way up, but within a very niche sport.
Was it daunting doing your first couple of commentaries, or were you somehow impervious to, I guess, the challenges that it poses being a commentator? Because listening to you now, obviously you're very experienced, you've been doing it for a long time, and it just sounds like second nature to you. But presumably when you started, you weren't as good as you are now.
No, and I'd hate to think what it sounded like. Funnily enough, before we pressed record, we were talking about my new backdrop, and on the shelf that used to be behind me, one of the shelves, I had the very dictaphone that I used for commentary. It was just like a plug-in microphone into this tiny little dictaphone, and I was on my own commentating amateur fights. And then for people that aren't kind of the uninitiated, for combat sports, you have like a walkout. Sometimes that walkout can take quite a bit of time. So that's either dead air if you lay out, or if you want to try and fill that air, you have to come up with anecdotes or just the storytelling, the information about the athlete, which I'm very passionate about. The walkout for me is the opportunity for me to really help an audience connect with who that person is that's about to go into battle, because it then separates them from just a fighter that's giving a great performance. If you know their backstory and the struggles coming in, or maybe not the struggles, something else that you just connect with, then you're going to follow that journey more closely. It just gives you another reason to watch. So I would run around backstage while people are getting their hands wrapped saying, look, dude, there was no YouTube and Facebook at the time. It was like, who are you? Why do you do this? What do you do for a day job? Those kind of real easy, kind of low hanging fruit bits and pieces. And then it was just trying to stitch stuff together to fill the time. So in terms of nerves, I'm not sure I had a great deal of time to think about it, but I must say, I obviously cared about it dearly, because even I wasn't getting paid to do these things, certainly at first, but I would actually visit gyms. If I saw a number of representatives from any one team, I'd actually think, okay, it's worth a visit down to, South London, Surrey, wherever it was. I obviously couldn't travel too far, but I would go down there. I would maybe train on the mats with these guys, or I'd just stand there with the coach and just get info, sit down with the fighters after and just try and get a little bit more. And I've always lived by if you're going to do a job, do it properly. But at the same time, I didn't have a coach in terms of the commentary stuff, no mentor. And MMA was such a, and still is such a young sport, that the only people I could look up to were the Mike Goldberg and Joe Rogan that were doing UFC broadcasts, Mauro Ranallo, who was on Pride as well. So to a certain extent, it was a bit of a blank canvas, but they were doing pros and they were giving information. I didn't have any of that. So if I wanted to fit into that format, I had to try and load up that information in order to try and fit within the parameters of how a mixed martial arts production is apparently run. And yeah, so I guess I had a little bit of a framework, but I had to sort of find my way with everything else. And I have to say, going back to what you said earlier, the picture one, picture two, I'm glad I lived through that. I wouldn't want anyone to skip those steps, because I learned so much about the craft in doing that. And I got a lot of respect, because I was then seen at the training ground, on a weekly basis, showing that, one, I could do a little bit. I was never aspiring to be a world champion, but also that I cared and I was interested in these humans. And so that's I think helped with any trolling, if you like, things of that nature, because I have worked my way up, and I've put in the hard yards in that sense as well.
Do you think that helped early doors when you were getting to know these athletes? The fact that it was a world that you were involved in as well at some level, it was something you knew about. You weren't just coming in to commentate an event, you were actively doing this too. You weren't afraid to get your hands dirty.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, and it was like, I was doubling down, because I'd go to another gym and that gym would have a different coaching style. They might have a different specialism. and there were new bodies. So when I was going and actually training with these people, I'm getting new looks. This is great. And sometimes I wasn't even having to pay because I was like an invited guest. So, and I would be able to add that to my own martial arts repertoire. So it was like a win-win. I'm participating in this sport that had really just grabbed me, and I was able to play a part in terms of representing it, but also now, as you say, I'm getting my hands dirty, but it's building my own knowledge base. So I just couldn't see there was nothing but upshot.
Yeah. When you were, I guess, rolling around with some of the guys on the mat, did any of them ever take advantage of that and think, let's fold this guy up like a pretzel because, we're the pros?
No, I mean, to be honest, I stopped doing that when things started getting more serious with Cage Warriors, because they were athletes just further away, and I wasn't going to give them too many good looks. But on the early days, it was amateurs, so it was all fairly competitive. I have been caught out a couple of times when I've been on the road, and I think that's just one of those things. I'm a UFC commentator. I'm not a UFC fighter. Very far away from being a UFC fighter, and that is increased. Like every hour that passes, I'm getting further away from that with my age and lack of activity right now. So no one ever did. And I have to say that this was where people have, again, a misconception about this, but I'm not saying that you inferred this, by the way, but there's a real brotherhood in mixed martial arts and in the jiu-jitsu community as well. I'm not saying that there aren't people that will put it on you sometimes, that those people do exist, but a lot of the times you've got to think about, don't break your toys, because then, you can't play with them again. So, and coming from boxing, like I'd stepped in, I've done all of these combat sports by myself. None of my friends have ever been into it. So I've walked into gyms alone and had to sort of earn my way in. And boxing was pretty gnarly at times, it was tough. I'd had people steal my gear before, and unless I asked for it back, they were probably going to keep doing it. So I've gone through that, but I've never had that with MMA, and I've never had that in jiu-jitsu. There's always this moment, this wonderful moment at the end of class where you'll see pockets of people just getting together and going over the technique and just, shooting the breeze and things of that nature. And martial arts has always been there for me. When I've had tricky times, I can just go back on the mats, and I know that my guys will always, give an ear, and we can go and expel our energy, and the ego's lost. And yeah, it is a bit of a church for a lot of people.
As an outsider, I just find the entire world of MMA fascinating. I've been in a gym, I've seen Liam McCourt work with, students and people on their grapple game, and seeing how you can map that out step by step and seeing how it's broken down in itself is just an experience, because it's so intricate, and yet you might not appreciate it when you're watching a fight at full speed.
Oh yeah. The devil is in a detail. It's just a lifetime of learning. And this is what is kind of upsetting, when people just dismiss the sport as being brutish, thuggish, this, that, and the other, because it's an amalgamation. You can bring any fight style to mixed martial arts, and people study individual arts a lifetime, and they will always try and, refine that art. And now you're trying to become as good as you can at all of these different arts, but also the meshing of that, the way that if you're a karate guy, but also you have you've now found ground skills, but how do you get from your karate stance down to a position on the floor where you can now try and explore some of your grappling? You need that in between. You need to be able to strike to a position where you're closing the distance in a safe way that you can take someone down, to then be in a more dominant position so that you can then be effective with your grappling. You don't get taught the in-between in anything else but mixed martial arts, because you don't need to. But in order to learn the in-between, you also need to know that the bookend. It's just, and it's evolving. We've seen a guy called Khabib Nurmagomedov, who is like 29-0. The guy's never been beaten. He was a guy from Dagestan, a wonderful combat sambo, judoka, and he's very aggressive with his with his striking and what we call something like ground and pound, like just hitting someone on the floor. But he does it in a unique way that we hadn't really seen in the early days of mixed martial arts. And the riddle hasn't been solved. He's still undefeated. So there's still room to go. We're by no means done. And that's what I think keeps a lot of people going.
And now he's looking at maybe getting into the world of football. I see he's been kind of tapping up Cristiano Ronaldo about any opportunities there. He did score a really good goal recently. I caught that online.
Yeah. I think he's pretty tasty with the football boots on as well. So, yeah, we'll see how he does. One of those guys, listen, try and tell him he can't do it, because everything else that he's turned his hand to, he's proved that he can. So, let's see his next moves.
I guess with Usain Bolt getting a run out for a club at one stage, you never say never anymore.
Oh, that's a very good point. Yeah, and he has so much influence back in Russia. It would not surprise me if he made his way onto the pitch one time. That'd be incredible.
With the UFC, do you think he's truly retired? Because it feels like one of those places where, it's like Westlife. There's always time for one more tour.
I have never heard that analogy before. I like that. I've got to bring that into a conversation soon. It'll probably be lost on a lot of my American friends, but I do like that one. I think in the short term, I do. I think his attention will be elsewhere. He's a man of his word. He's a deeply religious man. He's a big family man as well. And it sounds, for those that don't know, he lost his father not too long ago and made some promises to his mother. But he's also got a team now, because his father's passed, that kind of lantern is now residing with him. And he's got to shine for all of these other guys. And it's difficult to be the leader and help everyone up their game, but also be a selfish champion, because you need everyone's attention on you. It's very difficult to play both roles there. And I think he's obviously very proud of his perfect record and everything else. So he wouldn't just let any of that slide. So I do think right now he's done, but I can see a Georges St. Pierre situation wherein maybe in a couple of years, a few years, he may return for a big opportunity. We shall see.
And what a joy it's been to watch. And GSP in that category as well. Just such a unique fighter.
Yeah, someone who truly got me involved. He was like the original, like a real life karate kid. Yeah. He would come to the octagon in his gi. He wore the bandana as well. He was, a guy from Canada that got bullied, never spoke ill apart from like one time. And it only said I wasn't impressed with your performance. But it rang really loud for the fans, and it's become a very famous line. But he was such an athlete and just unassuming, just not what people would assume to be this cage fighter type. So I very much enjoyed everything about him when I was training or getting into it. And he's been brilliant. Like, he won, I think, 5 times the equivalent of BBC Sports Personality of the Year in a country that's big on sport. Hockey over there is huge, and I'm sure there are many, many other sports as well that Canada thrive at. But to be an MMA athlete and to take those honours on multiple occasions just goes to show you, what a fantastic job he did socially, culturally, as well as in a sporting sense.
And he was a great example of, that there is more than one way to fight. A lot of people, as you say, have this misconception that it's just big burly men beating on each other. And the way he moves, he's so agile. It's mind-boggling, to be honest. His feet, you just can't even, your eyes can't keep up with him. So goodness knows how you're meant to stop him when you're in there with him. Yeah,
he was one of the first, I believe, guys that we saw using gymnastics as, like, I wouldn't say cross training even, just to supplement his abilities. As I said before, when I say real life karate kid, that was because he was a karateka. That was his beginnings. But actually, most of his fights were won through dominant wrestling. So it was something that he had picked up secondary to his natural fighting ability. But yes, adding in all of these other things like gymnastics and just crazy athleticism. He really was, and still is, someone to follow. And as we all get older, someone to learn from and see how he's doing it. Because, he's a bit like Peter Pan, that guy. He doesn't seem to age a day.
And there's something about him too. I just think his like character can kind of live on forever. You know, I think if you make a computer game in 20 years and you want the legends of the UFC, you want to see GSP in there.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, he's a Hall of Famer. Like he is just one of those guys that will never be forgotten in the sport.
You've been very fortunate. Well, you've had to earn the right, of course, to work with people like that. What was your first kind of pinch yourself moment? Because it's one thing, obviously, volunteering in your hometown and working away. It's another thing, certainly, when you start to get, you know, up the levels and Cage Warriors, and obviously now with the UFC and the names you get to come in close contact with. When was the first time you thought, "Ooh, this is kind of happening. This is real"?
Yeah, I think when I started to get to my kind of final tenure with Cage Warriors, and that would have been he'll love me saying this, synonymous with Conor McGregor's rise, and like the big New Year's show that we did in Dublin, where his fans were just going crazy, and it felt like a moment, felt like something big was happening. He was going to get signed for sure after, you know, becoming a two-weight champion. So that was big. And then I started to think, well, I hoped more than thought. It's like, I really love this. I truly love this, but I never ever thought that it could become a full-time gig. And that used to get me quite upset, but there just wasn't a position for it. The UFC is a North American brand. That's where they're based in Vegas. All of their I hate the word, but I'm not sure if it's an American word. I've seemingly grown up in that space, but the talent team were just American men and women. That was how it was. We didn't have anyone over here. It just wasn't big enough, I guess. But I was lucky with timing where thankfully that obviously changed. But yeah, I would sit there thinking, we're on the cusp of something here as a sport, and we're seeing these people go from Cage Warriors. That's where I've been earning my stripes, so things were starting to feel a bit more serious then. And then I actually heard about the BT Sport deal, where they got the rights to the UFC, and they were putting a show on. And I started speaking to like TV execs. I'm like, wow, this is great. Because before, wherever I was working, there was no even really a running order, a format. It was kind of, here's your microphone, John, have fun, and we'll just do the rest. Which again, I think back now, and it's actually easy just to keep talking compared to working within guidelines. But filling dead air all the time and trying to create rapport with however many people you might have been working with on a monthly basis. So, yeah, I think when I started speaking with BT Sport, I finally did a gig at the BT Sport studios, and I was looking around in this vast studio. It was absolutely enormous. It's where you'll see Jake Humphrey sit with various other pundits, and it is a big space with lots of bright lights and a big gallery behind, and I was not used to anything like that. Even my time at the BBC, we'd go into Television Centre, which was very old school by comparison. So yeah, that was a moment. And then obviously, I think if I think about it, every time I take that position, I look around, I look next to me, and I've got Dan Hardy or Paul Felder or Daniel Cormier, and you just sit there and you think, how has this happened? Like, really? How have I managed this? This is some trick that I've pulled here. But then you have to get back to it. And as you say, you know, earn the right to be there and all that. So, and also there's a job to be done, and don't get complacent. Don't let that slip.
And I guess when you work with bigger personalities, there's that challenge then as well about how you let them be stars, but also how you keep the broadcast running properly.
Yeah, that is a challenge because, well, first and foremost, they are the stars. And I think as any play-by-play or lead commentator will attest, it's never about you. However, I do feel like there are broadcast elements that just have worked over the years. There are certain spaces within a sporting occasion where someone should speak and someone else shouldn't. And I have been doing things differently to all the other guys that have done it in the UFC, that have done a play-by-play role in the UFC. And I've I've come under some scrutiny for that, but I have to believe that the way that I'm doing it is the right way for me.
John, sorry, just to explain that for anyone that doesn't understand what you're saying, I don't want to talk over anyone's head.
Yeah, so basically, I think that, and this is no disrespect, again, because it's such a young sport, but Mike Goldberg, for example, never really did a great deal of training, particularly when it came to the wrestling and the grappling side. And when he was set up with Joe Rogan, who was a guy, actually, I think he was a top-level Taekwondo fighter, but actually then became a really big student of the grappling arts, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in particular. So it would essentially turn out that Mike would lead the dance, but then if the fight went to the ground, you wouldn't hear from Mike. It would just be Joe. So Joe would do what I would call the play-by-play of what was happening on the ground. And we've now, I guess, as a sport, because the UFC is overarching, it's just so powerful compared to everyone else, we've sort of adopted that that's the way that it's supposed to be. And I've been I push back on that a little bit, because I truly believe, and I've used football as my analogy for this, you know, whether it's a throw on, a free kick, a penalty, a short ball, a long cross, like that's the play-by-play. Like if the ball goes out of play, then the color commentator, the analyst will come in, or if they're thrown, they're challenged as to why something's happened, they're brought in. So I kind of think if it's a jab, a right hand, a single leg takedown, or a knee cut to side control, I still feel like that's my job. But now I want to hear the why. And because we're so conditioned, I think, as MMA fans, and even the guys that I'm working with, you know, they're so conditioned to thinking that that's their time to speak. I'm like, well, let me lead you deeper. Like, let me do that heavy lifting, and then you can really layer this, because otherwise, if you're talking over what I call the basics, then I'm not challenging you hard enough. And it's been, sometimes the guys are like, yeah, oh, okay, yeah, I get that. Other times they're like, you're overcomplicating this, and sometimes the guys are like, what the fuck do you know? Sorry, you know? But you are talking to, you know, big alpha males, and they do swear at me. So yeah,
you can swear on this, you're fine.
I haven't quite gone all Murray Walker, where I'm like wrestling with the microphone, because again, I don't want it to be about me, but what I'm trying to get at is that I want to bring a new, deeper level and challenge the guys that I'm sitting next to harder than what they have been before, so that we can improve the education, become more entertaining, and just, yeah, get to the real meat of these things. And yeah, be like, not saying that it's not how it's supposed to be done, because it's working as it is, but I just feel like we should always be pushing the boundaries.
And for anybody in the UK or Ireland that watches, the commentary style that you're talking about is very familiar with us, and in many ways that's what our audiences kind of expect, isn't it? So it's just a culture thing.
Yeah.
So then, as we're talking about working with big stars, that must be an interesting one to try and manage that, because there must be some people thinking, shut up, John.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they do. And yeah, I know they probably do. Like there's been a broadcast not too long ago where I did feel like someone was sort of trying to diminish my credentials a little bit. And I'm like, it's a bit unnecessary, but you know, I'm never going to win that battle. And you sort of go with it. But at the same time, the fans do also want to hear from the others and not me. But I also think that the fans need to trust that it's not because I want my voice to be heard all the time here, by the way. It's because I feel like we can give you a deeper, more polished broadcast if we adhere to certain sports commentary rules, and also I just think it's the right way to be. Why should we be different just because we're a young sport? But that challenges me, because I will get it wrong, because I'm not a black belt in any discipline. Although, you know, still have aspirations to be. I have to keep learning so that I can effectively play that role.
the passion shines through, and that's such a big thing for any commentator. You cannot fake that enthusiasm and love for it, and when you have an understanding for it from doing it as well, that just makes the experience so much better for the viewer. But I mean, if someone's hired as a color commentator, just do the color commentary. I mean, maybe, you know, I'm singing from the same hymn sheet as you. I guess I've got your back on that one. What does Dana White think? Is he hands off, or is he very hands on when it comes to the sound of the program and the running around the days leading up to it?
I don't know how the man does it. He is involved in everything, everything and everything. And I have so much respect for that. But I also know that the people that he has around him are the very best. And everyone's so passionate about making this work. No one's sitting there twiddling their thumbs with the UFC machine. There's no off season. There are very few weekends off. It is go, go, go all the time. And you can't take your foot off the pedal because you'll get left behind. So everyone is pulling together. But Dana just has this thirst and appetite for the small details. I've seen him talk about the lights, whether the lights are, I don't know. This is what I mean. He understands things so much deeper than most other people. Like, he will have a conversation with everyone who does their job, and you'd never be able to pull the wool over his eyes because he understands all the details. And it's fascinating. But there's a part of me that's like, how do you sleep? How are you not burnt out? Because I just couldn't do it. Like this, it fries me doing a show. Like, I am literally so wired I don't sleep for like 24 hours after a show. And then after that, I'm whacked. If I didn't have a toddler at home, I'd be in bed for, 16 hours probably. And Dana and his team, not just Dana, the producers as well, they go week to week to week. And they all care so dearly. I'm like, how do you do this? I don't know if it's a cultural thing. I don't want to kind of make us out on this side of the pond to be lighter weight, because that's not what I'm getting at. But they mask it very well. They just have such an energy. And it's just hats off to him the whole way through. It's
interesting in the sense that I've always been a big WWE fan, and I do see some parallels between him and Vince McMahon in terms of, the single-mindedness and ability to just make a huge success of something the way they want it to work, and to have that vision over such a long period of time and to continue to be successful. It's like, can 2% of the population of the world manage that? But these two individuals have.
Yeah, I put him in the same kind of category as like your Elon Musks, people that have an entirely new vision for the world. And, Dana's world is sports. And he and the Fertitta brothers and many of the executive team that he has around him have had a vision for mixed martial arts and the UFC's place within that for a very long time. They are well rehearsed now over, plus 25 years. They know what works, what doesn't work, what the fans want, and where they want to go. And so you have a very strong leader. And with the pandemic that came around, where many people were stopping and pulling back, Dana was brave. And the other thing is, he can, because it's his organization, and I think it's constructed in such a way that it is fluid. It can move, and it's very mobile. And the UFC has control of its own production, for example, rather than like with the Premier League, BT has a hold of it, then BBC maybe not the Premier League, but you've got many networks that tie into it. The UFC like, no, this is ours. We'll deal with that. Thank you very much. You can just take the feed. So with all of this, it was tailor-made for him to have a coming out party if he made the right moves, which he did. And the UFC's just enjoyed incredible success over the last couple of years. And what I'm most happy about is it's given a wonderful spotlight to our incredible athletes that many more people have been able to enjoy in a time when people needed some distraction as well.
And you're seeing more regularly now, UFC stars break out and do other things. They're not just pigeonholed into that one box for their entire career. So if they want to go into WWE, a la Ronda Rousey, or if they want to go into acting, or if they want to launch a brand and do something separate, that's all there because the UFC is now kind of big enough to launch them in whatever direction they choose to land?
Yeah, my broadcast partner, Dan Hardy, for example, you know, the guy's got his own clothing label. He's written a book. He's working on a new masterpiece within mixed martial arts. He's got his own gym. Then Michael Bisping, he's an author. He's many acting credits now to his resume. Yeah, as you said, there are so many examples now, and it is good to see that these MMA athletes, these UFC fighters and veterans are able to stand side by side with other world-class performers, whether that be athletic or otherwise. And that warms my heart. That's exactly what I wanted. I want for all of the athletes. Obviously, it's only reserved for a smaller amount, but I'm so happy to see that the sport's going in that direction because they really deserve it. It's such a tough sport, always round. So to get maybe not financial spoils, it's not always what motivates people, but to get that recognition and to have great opportunities be offered as a result of that, that's what we're after.
And we've seen the door open to some brilliant fighters from the UK and Ireland in recent times as well. I guess partly with what's going on in the world with Fight Island, they've been able to look and go, right, who can we get? Who can we put on cards? And we've seen, I guess, the likes of Rhys McKay, and I know he's going to go away and he wants to get back to UFC again. From a Northern Ireland perspective, selfishly, get that opportunity. Do you think that's something we're going to see more of? Will there be more UK names breaking through? I know, like, there's a lot of good stuff going on in Wales at the moment, for example.
Yeah, I do. And I think that the state of affairs right now is very challenging for the matchmakers at the UFC. There are because of the pandemic, it's taking a lot of... let me choose my words carefully here. A lot of fights are falling out at various times of fight camp, even as close to as fight week, because people are sadly getting COVID and, you know, they're recovering. These are very fit, healthy individuals, thankfully, but no one wants to go through that regardless. But what that means is the UFC has to adhere to strict safety protocols. So they have to be isolated and withdrawn from the bubble. And then someone else needs to step in. And because COVID is so widespread, so many more people are returning with positive results. And that means a lot more people need to be on standby. Sadly, the sport is suffering, much like all other sports, where the UFC is one of a few that are maintaining any activity. So we do have a great big basket of fighters that are currently inactive, and I do worry about that. I think that our talent pool will shrink because people can't afford to sit on the sideline. There's very little money until you get to the UFC, so that's going to be a real challenge. Just lifestyle, but also physically and mentally. The gyms are closed. Like I haven't trained. Like I'm someone who would aim to train 3 times a week and help out other grassroots fighters and guys that are pros and earn their living from that. And I've not been to the gym more than probably half a dozen times in over a year now. It's really sad. So I'm hoping for the best in that sense, but it is giving opportunities to people that are just sitting there. If they can put themselves in front of the UFC and they do have credible records, then they might just be given an opportunity on late notice.
And we've seen people answer that call. I have huge respect for anybody that does. What a daunting proposition. Because obviously, yes, you want that spotlight. Yes, you want your moment. And of course, you back yourself as a fighter. But someone that's been in a camp versus someone that gets a phone call with a week's notice, there's a big difference.
Yeah, and you mentioned Rhys. So I've known of Rhys for a long time. The gym that he trains out of as well has produced UFC caliber fighters in the past. But I mean, he had a really tough draw with an individual called Khamzat Chimaev. And Khamzat is someone who I'd seen as an early pro, and I'd already said he's going to make it all the way. I know I'd spoke to the UFC matchmakers about that, and lo and behold, he's proving to be every bit the talent that we thought he might be years ago. He's actually going to be stepping into a main event. He would have already done so. So let's just put that into perspective. Rhys walks in against the guy that's only been with the UFC a short while, but he has potential. Reece steps in on late notice. And I think, now that the following fight after that, is it the following fight or another one removed? Anyway, he's in a main event. So, like, debuts couldn't have really gotten much tougher for Reece McKee, but we just didn't know that at the time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and Chimaev is an absolute monster. It was evident within about 10 seconds, maybe even quicker than that, to be honest. He's a really, really exciting guy. And that's one of the things with the UFC too, that you might think you know what's going to happen. Often not the case.
Yeah, I often get asked for betting tips from my friends. I'm not allowed to bet, so I'll give them my opinions, and I'm terrible. I am awful. In actual fact, you're probably better off choosing against my picks. We did just like the production team, we every now and then we just go, who do you think? Not for just for bragging rights. I've never gotten close, not remotely. So yes, I'm terrible at predicting these things.
At least you're good at calling them. Have you got a favorite one that you've been involved with?
It's a tough one to answer that. I think, because sometimes the events are so big as well. Like the Dublin event back in 2014 where McGregor headlined. Again, we talk about moments, the Irish fans. I'm not just saying that. It's become like a notorious thing now. That's a bad turn of phrase.
No pun intended.
No, exactly. But that was a wonderful night where I think the Irish plus their adopted Irishman, Gunnar Nelson, they won all of their fights. And it was just, and that was from Paddy Houlihan, who opened the show, and it just kept building. I think there was maybe like 5 or 7 representatives. I can't quite remember, but it just kept building, and the place was wild. And I still haven't really experienced anything quite like it since. So that whole event was just mind-blowing. I was very lucky to be on the call for Anderson Silva, another absolute legend, versus Michael Bisping, legend, who I've actually shared the commentary booth with, but obviously the most successful UK fighter that we've had. He's a former champion. I was there at London's O2. I'm going to say that was like 2016, and I was still quite new to the role, couple of years in, and it was a big fight, big moment, and it was an epic battle. So that was big again. And then I think about trip to Korea, my first trip to Korea. I was very surprised by how good the fans were there. A lot of the evidence that we'd had of Asian fans with the UFC and fighting were Japanese fans with pride, and it would be very, very quiet until something happened, and there'd just be like applause. But that was not what it was like in South Korea. Those guys knew how to create a noise. And also Russia. We did an event at the Olympic Stadium. It was the last event before they tore the place down. Super old building, but very nostalgic. And just the smells, the sights. It was a pretty epic place. And 20,000 people there. MMA in Russia is massive. And that too was something that's a memory that will stay with me for many, many years.
Particularly with everything going on in the world at the minute, it must be really good to be able to draw upon those memories of holidays, going abroad, seeing places.
Yeah, that is one good thing about the work that we do. I mean, it has its pros and cons, but the travel is very special. I've been to some wonderful places. I always look forward to November, December, because it typically means the UFC are going to Australia. And they will probably do a fight night, which means there are different levels of events. I don't get to do the pay-per-view cards yet. That is done by a gentleman called John Anik, rightly so. He's been a fantastic broadcaster, been with the UFC a few years longer than I have. So he gets to do all the big numbered events. But if it's a fight night, then my name's in the hat. And it often becomes a fight night in Australia, and I love that country. And New Zealand, beautiful places. But I mean, how lucky am I that I've now been there maybe 4 times? Just incredible. I'm not there for a holiday, vacation. I don't tend to stick around very much, but just every now and then I've bolted on the 3 days one time. That was special. But yeah, it's a good part of the job. But then you miss home. My wife's at home alone, trying to raise our daughter. She works as well. So that brings about its own challenges. We don't have any help with the childcare, get your violins out. So yeah, it's hard coming back through the door and seeing what I'm met with sometimes. But I'm grateful for my wife to sort of sticking by me, sticking with this on this journey that she didn't ask for, because mine's taken many twists and turns over the years.
Yeah, the unsung heroes and all this always are your nearest and dearest, aren't they?
Yeah, for sure. And like, when I was on the up with commentary, like the grassroots stuff that we were mentioning, I was working for my dad at the time. And if he'd have wanted to be a hard-nosed boss, I wouldn't have been given the freedom that I probably was, in terms of even like owning the radio and putting on a podcast, an MMA podcast, and going into the van at lunchtime to call a fighter to interview him, or taking every weekend out to go and call fights somewhere, like whether they be locally or in the Middle East. So he doesn't like the sport. Like, none of my family really do. But at the same time, I think he respects what I've achieved. But I have to say, I would never have been able to do that if he was just a normal boss, because they would have cracked down on it before it had gotten to the stage where I was able to do more and more stuff and get noticed.
In the early days, you must have had a few ropey trips, like traveling with the UFC. I imagine you're in nice, you have a bit of legs room in your flight, and you're in a nice hotel, and the food's good quality and it's coming regularly. Maybe not always the case.
Not always the case. No, no. It's we've had some gnarly trips. Like the trip to Chechnya comes to mind, just because I think rather than the actual experience, the thought of going to Chechnya, one of my closest friends, my best man at my wedding, he's an underwriter in insurance, and he underwrites terrorism, war, and some political risk or something like that. Anyway, I spoke to him before I took this trip and said, right, I've been asked to go to Chechnya. What do you reckon? He said, absolutely not. And I was like, why? And he said, well, I get these security reports on regions, etc., and it's like a no-go zone. You just don't go there. He said, the most dangerous place in Europe is Dagestan. Second most dangerous is Chechnya. I said, we got a flight into Dagestan because we can't get a flight into Chechnya, because apparently the airline can just steal your money at the transaction point and then just cancel the flights. So they have to do it that way around. And he's like, yeah, don't do it. How much are you getting paid? And I told him how much I was getting paid, which is a couple of £100. And he's like, no way should you go and do that. He said they might like kidnap you for ransom. So yeah, I was nervously took that trip, and we had to drive through the night through Dagestan into Chechnya, not really going through armed checkpoints with like machine guns and torches, dogs running around outside. That was pretty gnarly at times, like loud voices and cars like screaming up and just pitch black coming up, and you're thinking, right, are we going to get pulled over here? And then just overtaking, you're like, okay, no, we're still going, we're still safe. So that was probably more just my mind working overtime. I've been to Beirut and just driving around and seeing armored vehicles and the holes in the buildings that hadn't yet been repaired. So that again was just brought a lot of things back to mind about where people are politically and economically in the world. Otherwise, even trips down to the south coast in tiny little hotels with like super thin walls, and you could hear all of the sadly intimate noises coming from somewhere. You have to deal with all of that. But a lot of the time on the local shows, you're in and out pretty quickly. And once you've done the show, there's always a kind of celebratory feel. So you get to bed pretty late anyway. But it makes you the character that you are today.
I would think there's some great celebration stories that maybe aren't safe for air.
It's all very PG, nothing like that.
Indeed. outside of your interest, obviously, with the UFC, and I love, by the way, that you said the word "yet," and that's the mentality that anybody should have. I'm going to change what I was going to ask, because that's kind of, do you kind of feel like one of the fighters in that way sometimes as a commentator, where you're like, you've got this goal you're working towards, there's only one spot, and you've got to make yourself, as good as you can to get it?
Yeah, as in, I'm always trying to be better, if that's what you're getting at, and just self-improvement. There's that, and but also, I think for me that the real challenge is life. And I've got a wonderful job, and I enjoy it, but I can't underplay the challenges that it does create for me, with like my marriage, and because I'm away from home a lot, a third of the year. When we're going hard with the UFC and no pandemic, like I have to be away a third of the year in order to make this work financially. So, and that's a long time to be away. It's a long time to be away from a relationship, your family, your friends. I miss all the weddings. I miss funerals. I miss occasions, anniversaries, birthdays, and my wife is big. I cannot underline enough how big she is on occasions, and yeah, it just doesn't go down well. And she's right, but it's also my job, and I love my job, and this is so it's trying to keep that balance going, and that's where I find I have to put a lot of effort in. The skill and the craft itself, I think I'm lucky that I'm naturally inquisitive. You have to shut me up. At things of, and again, that whole byproduct of being a martial artist. So I'm always, it's the stuff that I'm absorbing anyway. It's not a chore to do this. So yeah, but there are certain things, like I've been trying to learn how to learn, if that makes sense. I've been reading a book called Make It Stick recently. I recommend it if you haven't read it already. And it talks about how we would have probably been taught incorrectly about how to remember stuff. I have a terrible memory. So every time I go to work, I'm pretty much cramming for an exam because I've forgotten what that fight looked like, last year or 2 years ago. Some people can remember each and every move. It's just not the way that my mind works. But also the way that I've gone about trying to absorb that information seems incorrect. So I'm always looking to try and get better at things like that, typing, productivity. So there are certain things that we can all do on the periphery that will help us be more effective with the process. So they're the things that I can affect directly. So I do that. But otherwise, staying there, I guess, just trying to be present with the fans and stick my arm in the air and just show the UFC that I'm willing and able, or willing, and if I'm able is up to them, but willing to do whatever they want me to do. I do writing for the UFC. I produce most of the features that you see out from the European fighters, which is a skill that I've learned really with the UFC, as well as hosting, commentary, and things. So I'll do anything that they want me to, really, and I'm happy to learn new things and add more strings to my bow.
That's what makes you an asset. That's why you got that new multi-year deal, and congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, again, not really by design did I do these things. Some of it was I would work infrequently for the UFC, which meant financially it just wasn't enough to be my sole gig. And I was having to still be an electrician as well as be a commentator. And they really did not mesh very well. And going back to something I mentioned earlier, I loved the commentary stuff so much. It's like, well, if I'm that good, why aren't I can't be that good if it's not full time. Like if you're good at something, you'll be doing it full time. And I used to beat myself up about this, but it was just the nature of how things were with scheduling. But I then ended up doing some producing work, and that actually paid more than what I was getting on site. So like, great, I do a few of those, and all of a sudden I took a little bit of a hit financially, and I'm like, okay, if I can make the same money as I can as an electrician doing this stuff, great. I've just made my life much better. So that was what I wanted to do when I first set out. I've achieved that. I've done a little bit better, thankfully. Now I just want to keep it rolling.
Must have led for some interesting workplace conversations when you were a lackey. What are you doing at the weekend? Oh, I'm going to go watch the football. Oh, I'm away to commentate on the UFC. It's not the normal answer.
Yeah, it was getting like that. And you also that you do start, despite what I might have said earlier about being a public figure, you do sometimes get caught when people are, do I recognize you, or have I seen you before? And then people are staring at you sometimes. You're like, I wonder if they saw the UFC on the weekend, where I made, because the UFC you present and commentate. Again, it's an American broadcast. So we open the show and they put cameras on us through the broadcast, which is not something that we normally have seen historically with football and rugby, etc. But they do that. So you might have been seen and heard. So yeah, it's a bit of a weird one. And again, it was more about me not wanting to be on site and wanting to be a commentator, and therefore really wanting to be recognized so that I could turn around to someone and say, I'm a commentator. I'm a sports commentator. I'm a presenter. I'm a sports broadcaster. I just wanted to really come away from that other life and confidently say that this is what I did for a job now, because I just love it, that was the goal.
I said this to you just before we got started. It's such an interesting thing the way the UFC do that, because you couldn't imagine coming up to an FA Cup final and, I don't know, seeing Martin Tyler, Sam Matterface and Guy Mowbray out to face the press.
Yeah, but why not? And this is when you think about it, I mean, yeah, they are two different skill sets. I'm not going to underplay that, because I worry more about, maybe not so much these days, but I would say I used to worry more about the show opens on camera than I did about the commentary, because the commentary is live and you can't prepare for what's about to, it hasn't played out. I don't have a crystal ball. So you just bring your knowledge in and you say what you see, right? You use your commentary skills to layer and add some color to what's going on. But in terms of opening the show, you have to hit certain notes, certain points, and take it a level further. Like, I love the English language, so there might be certain terminology, certain words that I'd want to hit. And if I'd missed those, then I'd be down on myself and I'd think about that the next time. So I used to really get a little bit nervous about when that red light would go on. But it's also put in the middle of the broadcast when it's super chaotic. If you're running a bit long on the prelims going into the main card, it's like, right, get out and get ready to go on. So you literally have to turn around and you've got to take your cans off. They've got to cover the desk. You've got to have the water. I drink a lot, so I have some water available. I might have my lip salve as well, because I get a dry mouth or dry lips. Then you've got to make sure you look okay. You've got a makeup artist in your face. You've got to put your in-ears in. Now you've got to start thinking about the words that you're about to present. If you've got a live audience, they know the UFC product, and all of a sudden you've got a couple of hundred people that have gathered around this position, all with their iPhones like this. And the weirdest thing that one of the most poignant memories was when I first did that. This was what I saw. When I spun around, I was getting ready, saw all of these lights, just saw these twinkly lights. And I'm like, what is that? And it's just, everyone knew what was about to happen. And they had a phone, and I don't know why, because there are obviously many more people watching back home through the lens that you're talking down to. But that kind of put me on edge. I'm like, oh, there's all these people here that are within earshot. Not that they would have been able to really hear. But to try and compose yourself with people, sound engineers and a floor manager, and you're trying to focus on what you actually want to say. That is one of the bigger challenges of the broadcast. But again, I kind of like that challenge. And I like the fact that we can also be someone that's seen, spoken about the ambition to be a presenter, and I scratch that itch. It's something that I'm able to do.
And with the in-ears, there's a lot of voices in your head that isn't just your thoughts, which people do not realize. How long did it take you to get used to that? Because just holding my own hands up, the first couple of times I did it, it was so off-putting, I was getting almost cross.
Yeah, it's been a challenge. It's a real challenge for a lot of other people. I think I've been quite lucky. For some reason, it's not something that I've really struggled with, but it's funny, and you'll know this. Every now and then you'll say a wrong word, and it's because at the very same time that you were saying something, you had someone say something in your ear, and you've then changed whatever it was, and you never meant to say that. That word was never on the tip of your tongue. It's just in that moment has just transformed into something else. Like I said body cock one time, which is a very unfortunate phrase. And I think it was either body kick or body lock, probably lock, that I was looking for. And like, obviously the internet won the day with that one. But it's funny how these things happen. And the people at home just think you've made a slip up. But I'm like, someone was in my ear at the very wrong moment. Not their fault. That's just the gig. Your producer, particularly for a UFC show, when I take close to 200 reads into a broadcast, they are constantly in my ear, constantly. So I've got to get used to that very, very quickly.
And have a good relationship with your producer is always a good bit of advice, isn't it? Get that balance right and know what each other likes.
Yeah. And I work with 3 producers, all Americans. They are all wonderful, like what they do, like top producers. It is the hardest, I believe. And I've had this from guys that have done Champions League, World Cup, football, and the Olympics in the UK. They believe that the UFC broadcast is the most complicated broadcast that they've ever experienced in sports, just because there's so many moving parts, so much promotional material that goes into it. So the producers therefore have to be very handy. And we have a really good relationship. In America, they're very big on the talent team. They have to die for the talent team. Whatever the talent team says goes. And I actually disagree with that. I don't like that. I don't like to be thought of that I'm in any way more special than anyone else. I just don't agree. I feel like the producers really are the ones that are driving that show, in fact, just because they're not seen. So they are always making sure that we're well prepared, and even if they said or did what they were supposed to do for their job, but it upset my rhythm, they would apologize to me for that. And I'd say, dude, no, I just need to be better at that. You were doing your job. No, you're the one on the front line. It's like, okay, I can't even take this one for the team. So yeah, what I'm getting at is I'm very lucky with the producers that I work with. They've become friends as well as colleagues, and yeah, we're all in it together. As a commentator, you're at the tip of the spear. All of the people behind you have been working on this event for however long, and everyone in the back has been gathering all of this information, and it's through you, and that's a heck of a responsibility, a privilege as well. So yeah, we have to work well together in order to deliver.
And then you say body cock.
And then I say body. And I've said some crazy stuff as well, and I hate to go through it. Thankfully, again, my memory not being so good allows me to forget some of these things, but I'm sure I'll be reminded of a few after this.
It happens to everybody, and I would challenge anybody to try and get through a commentary without something slipping out that they didn't intend. Yeah,
like a UFC broadcast, the longest one I've done is 9 hours. 9 hours.
That's a lot.
That was Fight Island. But typically we're talking 6-7 hours of talking. Mm-hmm. I urge anyone to do that and not fluff their lines. Give it a go. It's not easy. So yeah, I'm a little kinder to myself nowadays. And often, you'll know this, we'll beat ourselves up about something, and maybe the viewers never even noticed. So it's trying to find that balance. But there's I've gotten out of broadcast before, and people have said, you said X, Y, and Z. Did I say that? Oh my word. I do not have any memory of that whatsoever. Certainly didn't mean to. Those sorts of moments are very scary, but yeah, you can't dwell on them too hard.
Well, that's so true as well. I think, everyone's self-critical, or at least, if you want to be successful, you probably need to be to some extent. I remember it was a Carl Frampton fight actually, and I was very lucky someone had scored us ringside. So, and I'd come off the radio and I just thought today was not a good day for Micah. And the first person that saw me was a sort of different, work for a different organization. They were like, "Oh, loved you today. Thought that was great." And I went, "Oh, right, okay." You know, but this was a few years ago, and I had to learn that from myself. It's like, maybe I didn't hit all the notes that I wanted to hit, but to anyone else listening, they were happy enough. So, you know, learn from it. Yeah, be better, but don't lose sleep over it as well.
Yeah, and it's where you take your feedback from. So as I say, I have a really good support team of producers around me, and as much as, you know, that they're there, they feel like they're there for the talent team. Like, in order for us to be better, we need constructive feedback. And like, my coordinating producer has an incredible brain and mind for production, and also for the presentation of. So I'm always keen to know what he thought. And I won't lie, if he says there were certain things that he didn't like, I do get upset about that. Sometimes I don't agree, but at the same time, I have to agree, if that makes sense, because I just respect his opinion so much. And yeah, then you just have to get better. You have to take it on board and move on. But sometimes when he says, thinking about it, no, I thought you did a really good job, or there was one moment here where you said this, and I thought, where did he get that from? I love the way that he did that. And then I sit there, I think, listen, that has made my month. And it fills me with pride, because it came from him, and I can go forward and go, right, okay, we do more of that next time.
Before we finish up, anyone that's watching this on YouTube will have been screaming at me probably for ages, going, "Look at his background. Look at how beautiful it is. What are we? what are we looking at?" It's a very lovely presented room, I have to say, John.
Yeah, I've been working on this for a while. It's had a few different creations behind me, but this is what I'm going with now. The lockdown, the pandemic, and has really shown us that we're going to be working from home an awful lot more. I hope I'm not going to be commentating fights from home, but I do a show called Inside the Octagon, which is filmed here. I have my own content that I produce as well, always looking to do more of that. So I wanted to give it a different feel. So I just, I've got the workspace looking a little more sexy. I've literally just finished it over the weekend. So there's still a few blank spaces. Like here, I've got a photo that I want to put up, and some stuff over here as well. I have some shelves in the corner. There's some more shelves need to go here. So by the end of tomorrow, that should look a little more healthy. Yeah, it's just, there's a story between everything. Like, this poster was given to me by a friend of mine when I was working at Cage Warriors. He knew that I wanted to do things in the UFC one day, and so that, although it might not mean much to anyone else, that poster, that's what that means. This is all the different arts through time and how old a lot of the things were. That's all the champions. Then I've got some tickets and lanyards, and a program in the top corner. That was my very first UFC gig. Behind or below that are all the key cards, not all of them, but I've collected key cards from my travels, and I stuck them and framed them. So now I've got a memory of a lot of the places that I visited. And that's a signed poster from a night in the Tele2 Arena, which was a football stadium. 32,000 people turned up at like 4 or 5 in the morning to watch their local man get beat in double quick time. So that wasn't so good. And then I've got an Arsenal picture in the corner as well. Can't forget about the Arsenal. So yeah, that was a short tour of what we've got going on here. But I'm happier with it now. It's starting to look a little bit more professional.
It looks very good. I'll give you a plug as well. It's on your YouTube channel. So for anyone that doesn't already, subscribe to John Gooden on YouTube. You can see that all up close if you're thinking, well, I want to see those grappling holds. I want to see whatever. It's all on there with more detail. I made sure to subscribe as well. Just on Arsenal, thoughts at the moment? Hard being an Arsenal fan.
Yeah, just when you think things are starting to turn and they go back the other way, it's tough. You know, I do feel like Premier League football managers it's probably one of the most cutthroat jobs ever. And I just don't agree that you can make the necessary changes within a 12-month period or even a couple of years. Like, really, I know it's a results-driven business, but I just don't think it's a healthy habit that is now come with football. But the fans demand certain things, and then we just see the same faces just get rotated around different clubs. And I guess as a sports broadcaster or a broadcaster in general, we don't like that because we always see the same presenters, right? And all of these big shows, like, what about the little guys? Give someone else a go. Like, maybe they can do a good job and it helps more people come through. Anyway, I digress. So yeah, as an Arsenal fan, it's a bit tricky. We've got some really good young talent. Some of the senior guys just aren't performing. I was pretty excited. I was pretty excited about Willian coming along, but I've got a very close friend who's a Chelsea fan. He said, I don't know why. Then his first game, he had a really good game. And the WhatsApp group was on fire towards our Chelsea buddy. But ever since then, we have been having to eat our hat. So, yeah, there's some frustration there. And Arsenal is seems like a very complicated club to understand. Like whatever's going on upstairs seems to be quite different to many other clubs. I just hope they get it sorted out because we have such a wonderful infrastructure with the incredible stadium, the fans, and the team. You know, we deserve to be doing better than mid-table, but we'll see. I do like Arteta. I like the noises that he'd been making when he first came, and I like the messaging generally. I think he knows Arsenal Football Club. I believe that the changing room, he has the buy-in of the changing room. I just think he needs a little time and form, some luck, and a few other things. So we'll see. But yeah, it's a bit of a challenging watch these days.
Yeah, and as you say, anyone that supports a smaller club will go, Arsenal fans don't really have too much to complain about by comparison. So there's the perspective.
They're absolutely right. Yeah, and I've been a season ticket holder for a long, long time now, and it's like the only thing that my dad has outside of his work. I haven't been going obviously through the pandemic just before then because I'd be working on the weekends, but. Yeah, we are a moany bunch, and from being outside of the sport as well, of football, and coming in, like I work in a celebratory environment. There's not much booing at fight nights. It's just everyone cheering, positive energy. So sometimes going to the Emirates, and I sit in the East Lower as well, which isn't really the singing bit of the stadium. And everyone's moaning about it. I'm like, why do you guys bother? Like, support the team. Like, get up and cheer, sing, whatever. But everyone's entitled to that. And I get the kind of roots of football support and what it means to the people. So we're used to a certain level of success down at N5. Are we still in N5? So, yeah, hopefully it will return soon.
Well, there you go, Arsenal fans. Maybe some positivity there from John. He can't work miracles, but maybe Arteta can. John, it's been great talking to you. I really appreciate you coming on and doing this, and I wish you every success. It's been fantastic seeing your journey, your progression, and that new contract is just proof of what the UFC think of you. So well earned, well deserved, and continued success.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. It's good to talk to someone else who shares the same job title as well. I don't have many friends that do this, so I'm glad that I can add you to that very small list. So yeah, let's stay in touch, and let's hopefully have more conversations down the line.
Thank you for listening to the Michael Clark Show podcast. You can follow me at M Clark Show on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Check back every Wednesday for a brand new episode, which you can download as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. You can also watch the entire interview via my YouTube channel. That is youtube.com/The Michael Clark Show. And if you like our theme song, it has been kindly provided by the brilliant SX70. Search for SX-70 on Spotify to stream their music. Until next Wednesday, take care. I'll speak to you soon.